Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Item number 5, regular agenda, ordinance amendment, amending Chapter 8, Trades and Businesses of the Code of Ordinance of the City of Gastonia to add a new Article 2, Division 7, entitled Regulations of Donation Drop Boxes, and to make certain other technical corrections. Resolution setting fee for issuance of a permit for operation of a donation drop box. And this will be presented by Assistant City Attorney Melissa McGee.
This matter came before the, I can't remember which committee it came before. I believe it was the
Facilities.
Committee.
Right.
Before, and that report was on the last council agenda, and it was determined that the actual ordinance would be brought back to this meeting for a vote on the ordinance as well as the resolution setting the actual permit fee. Included in your packet is a memo that explains the changes that have been made as well as the resolution setting the permit fee. The permit fee has been set at $50 for all entities. There was some discussion about setting the permit fee at differing amounts for nonprofits and for-profits, but after doing some research and based on some recent on a recent federal case that has been issued, the legal staff would suggest that we set one permit fee for both for-profits and nonprofits and not differentiate in the fee. So the only other change, the requested changes that were made from the committee have been made, and I would note that in the ordinance as written, based on the representative of the Goodwill that appeared at the last meeting requesting that the drop boxes be allowed to be made of wood based on their program, it has been included in the ordinance that the drop boxes can be made of metal or wood. So that is up for your consideration as well. If you determine that you would rather go back to just the metal, of course that can be changed. You know, it's certainly up to the council which way they would prefer to do that. But as I said, all of the requested changes have been made, so staff would recommend the adoption of the ordinance and the resolution.
Questions? Councilman Kimball.
First one, Melissa, are we going to be able to establish when an entity is for profit, and I did review some of the legal brief of what you're speaking, can we establish through a reporting process by that entity, in fact, that they are the monetary amount or the amount in goods or clothing that they're giving back to the city of Gastonia?
That would be very difficult to do. I don't believe that we have, that is not required as part of the ordinance, so they do not have to report that to us. And based, although that, I don't know that we could place a requirement that only those entities that give a certain amount back to the city of Gastonia or spend the money in the city of Gastonia, I guess would be the more appropriate way of putting it, that it would be limited to those entities.
No, that was not my point, madam.
Okay.
My point was getting a report from the particular entity that had the donation boxes in our city that would provide a report to the governing body of how much is coming back to the city. Do you understand the difference?
Yes, I do understand what you're asking. That is not part of the current ordinance. We could certainly.
I think a quarterly report, it seems like a quarterly report it would not be that onerous, since in fact they must have some records of the stuff they pick up here. If they're physically picking up the stuff out of the drop boxes, there has to be a record somewhere.
There would, and I don't actually know what records they would be required to keep based on the state. If they're for-profit entities, they probably wouldn't have to have a record of that, because all that they would be required to do would be to report their income if they're for-profit. If they're non-profit, they would be required to report the amount of their donations. I don't know that they would have to report, particularly for, if they got donations from more than one city, if they had donations, drop boxes in various cities. I don't know that there would be any other requirement that that they would have to keep those kind of records. Now, whether whether the city itself could require it for just Gastonia's purposes, that I'm not sure of. I'd have to do some research on that, whether that would be something that we could require.
I mean, I'm not sure I would see a constitutional prohibition on asking, not requiring, asking how much was given back to our city from having drop boxes
I mean,
here.
you could certainly ask, but
You know,
if
that's
they refuse
kind of where,
if they refuse to give it, that's what I would have to research, if you would have any recourse if they did not keep that information.
okay.
Councilman Curlin, excuse me.
Maybe in this circumstance, this could be part of the application process, as, kind of a guideline, policy.
Sure.
Not part of the actual ordinance itself, but maybe the other question is why are you thinking of keeping or requesting this information?
I personally, and both in personal basis and also as a member of the elected body, would like to see what is being given back to our city from the selfless giving of our citizens when they're putting, items into the boxes. What is the benefit to our city from doing that?
With the purpose of doing what with that information long-term?
I don't have I don't have a long-term goal in mind, but I would like to see what a particular entity is giving back to the city.
Yeah, I think it would be great from the standpoint that gives, these organizations bragging rights, quite
I agree,
frankly.
Dave.
And that way, they can actually, tout that in any way they choose, but to show that that organization specifically is making sure these monies or these donations come back to us in some way, so.
Or a portion thereof.
I'm in favor. I just kind of wondered where you were going with it, that's.
No, that's pretty much where I'd want to be, is
Okay.
just kind of get a snapshot of what's going on.
Okay.
Councilman Galver.
Do we have a big problem with donation drop boxes? I mean, that requires an ordinance and a fee?
You haven't seen them all popping up everywhere in our city.
I have not.
I
I mean,
certainly.
I myself, I'm just curious about, why do we need a regulation on drop boxes?
Did you answer?
I mean, these people are doing, most of them are doing it for charity, and I understand that some are doing it for profit, but why an ordinance?
Well, I think where I was one of the ones that kind of pushed this forth, and on several levels. Number one, from a public safety standpoint, I think that our ordinance goes quite a distance in making sure that if in fact someone with ill means was not able to put some type of a device, an explosive device, and frankly, we all saw what happened at the Boston Marathon, at a pressure cooker bomb. You could imagine what a donation box would hold. That's why part of our ordinance is to keep it away from areas where people congregate. Secondly, we have a number of companies that, frankly, I've seen in my travels through my district and other parts of the city are frankly untraceable. I don't even know how they even got there. And frankly, in talking to a number of the property owners and store owners, they don't know how they got there either. They've appeared. And I think for that reason, there needs to be some regulation.
But have any store owners complained to the city or to police
Absolutely.
officials saying, why is this here?
Yes.
And have there been any bombings in any drop boxes throughout the United States?
Well, there are two separate phases there, Councilman. Number one, do we have to wait for an incident before we proactively take steps to safeguard the public? Number one. And number two, I specifically spoke with two business owners that had no idea they appeared in the middle of the night. And frankly, there isn't even a phone number on one to get it removed. So yeah, that was my impetus for pushing this forth.
because this came before the facility committee, which I do chair, okay, you know, I feel like I need to jump in here as chairman of the facilities committee. And there were some, stakeholders that had drop boxes that came and spoke at the facility committee meeting. And they say that when we went through some of this with them, they said this is not anything different than what they're doing in other cities, okay? They're paying fees, they're being held accountable, and they were very supportive of that because then there's accountability by the city and with them. It was a relationship between the people that own the drop boxes and the city to make sure that the drop boxes that are within our jurisdiction are legitimate, okay? So there was support from the drop box organizations that came before the committee, just FYI, just information for you, that they were in support of something like this, and they helped, in fact, they made some changes in it at that meeting.
Yeah, I just don't want to be just putting undue ordinances out there
Right.
For a Dropbox if it's not really needed. Are we going to have police follow-up to make sure that the decals are on there? Are we placing a burden on the police staff to do stuff like that? I mean,
This was all discussed.
it's
Do you not remember
just-
the last meeting?
I'm just reading this, I'm just curious. You know, I've been around in certain businesses and I haven't seen a big problem with the donation drop boxes as is. And I guess it's just, we want to create a fee and accountability,
Any other questions?
Just a comment. I mean,
ahead.
you know, obviously, the purpose for the fee is to help to offset the cost of the administration of the ordinance in terms of whether it be, you know, the inspection of the boxes, the applications that are going to have to be processed. But I think there's, you know, I think, you know, Councilman Kimball mentioned, you know, issues of public safety. I think we have issues of fairness to those in the, let's call them the Dropbox community. Fairness in the Dropbox community that, you know, that the intentions that they have by putting these out are not thwarted by those who are dropping these off, who could be from out of town, out of state. And again, to Councilman Kimball's thought that, hey, let's get some information. Is some of this coming back to us, or is, you know, this Dropbox for book heaven or something, you know, those books are going off to, you know, Wichita or somewhere, you know. So, you know, we don't like to put undue burdens on the community as far as that goes, but this is a form of commerce. And this is a business. This is actually a big business. And so I think sometimes businesses do have to, you know, they have to, you know, kind of follow along with things. We have privilege licenses. We have all kinds of business, you know, licenses that we require. So why should not this be in some way, and I don't think this is onerous, $50, you know, for the amount of materials that they receive, you know, once a year, I don't think is, you know, too unreasonable. Yes, it is another thing that we have to police, but I think it's for the protection of the community too.
Councilman Kimball.
Yes, and I think that in the spirit of this and in what we looked at, and I happened to attend the committee meetings, I don't think we set out to establish a fee per se. I think it was more to establish some common sense regulation and understanding of where your donations are going, and also, frankly, that that the public that donates knows whether they're donating to a nonprofit or a for-profit. And I think that there's a big distinction there, as you said, Doctor. Thank you.
Councilman Pearsall.
Councilman Kimball touched on one of the things I wanted to discuss was the fee, and that at the facilities committee meeting, the several representatives from some of the larger organizations that have most of the drop boxes commented on the fees they pay in other cities, and ours was to the lower to middle end of that fee schedule, and they were totally supportive of the fee. So when you're telling somebody, I'm gonna charge you, and they're saying, that's cool by me, it's kinda hard to argue that. But, the only other thing I wanted to touch on, which I really appreciated, Goodwill coming and commenting on the wood boxes. But I still have a little bit of concern with that, because one of the issues why this was brought up was safety concerns. And one of the reasons metal boxes was put in place is when the legal staff and others researched what the ordinances were in other cities, it specifically states metal because they are safer. If an incendiary device was placed in there, you don't have exploding shards of wood flying into a crowd or something like that. So I have, even though I'm sympathetic to Goodwill's plight and the program that they do with that, I think if they're training someone to build a wood box, there's other avenues they could train somebody to work with wood other than build a wood box. So while I'm sympathetic with them, I'm not sure that changing our ordinance and reducing the safety aspect of it is worth that. I think we should just keep it metal only. They last longer. They don't fall apart as easy. You don't have to worry about, you know, the visual coming down the road and it's on the corner and the door's falling off or a piece of wood's falling off and you got to go over there and call. And I just have concerns about it. Multiple reasons. So for that, I don't think I could support it with wood being in the ordinance.
Any other questions, concerns?
Well, we haven't had this conversation really about the wood. We had the request,
Yeah.
you know, made, and we were asked to consider it, but, you know, I'd like to hear from Mr. Kimball on that, you know, just because I feel like part of what you were trying to do was, again, from a public safety aspect, and your opinion about this wood versus metal issue.
Councilman Pearsall and I had this discussion earlier, actually, while we were having dinner, and his analysis, frankly, is correct, is that you have much more shrapnel, that, especially in a shorter-term area, that can be coming out of wood than metal. The metal is more, can contain better than wood can. Okay. Also, from a standpoint of injury reduction, if the worst was to occur, it's much easier to remove metal from something than it is wood. So I do sympathize with much of what Councilman Pearsall said, especially with regard to we understand that the particular entity that came before us only had the best intentions, but I think overall, I do concur that I believe metal boxes would be our best. My opinion.
Any other questions? Is there a motion?
You gonna remove the wood from it?
Is that the motion?
I would make a motion to approve as presented by staff with the exception of metal-only boxes.
Is there a second?
Oh.
Second?
Discussion? Yes, sir.
Now, the wooden boxes were for Goodwill to teach people a skill on how to build. And these are people that are trying to learn a trade and learn to support themselves. And we're gonna tell them, thanks, but no thanks? I think that's pretty poor.
I have a comment.
Okay, yes, sir. Councilman Pearson.
That's why I said I appreciate Goodwill coming and offering that information, but I also think that if you are an organization that teaches a trade or a skill, asking somebody to build a wooden box isn't exactly going to get you hired the next day. I think there are other avenues and other means and other methods that they can use for construction or training other than just building a wood box. I don't think if we say you can't put out wood boxes anymore that the construction training program at Goodwill is going to fold up and fall apart, because I think the wooden boxes are probably part of that. Why not? You need a box, you're teaching construction, build a wooden box. but I think there are other things for them to do. I don't think we're killing a program with that.
Councilman Gallagher.
I think basically we're afraid that there's gonna be an incendiary bomb placed in one of these drop boxes, and it's better to have metal have an incinerating bomb than a wooden drop box. That seems absurd. I haven't heard of any drop boxes having bombs in them throughout the United States. Am I wrong on this?
Councilman Kimball.
Again, I have not done a study on whether there have or have not been, but we know that there's been many types of improvised explosive devices, both from here all the way to the Middle East, where we fought our desert wars. And frankly, we're not saying that that's the only reason. But frankly, as you bring up the terminology of incendiary, frankly, it doesn't have to be a bomb. Wood burns better than metal. And if somebody mistakenly threw something of a flammable mixture in the woodshed, it would burn. The metal would burn itself out. But in fact, I think that we also have a duty to act proactively when we see a type of issue, and I think that's what we're doing here. And we don't have to wait for there to be a tragedy to act. Obviously, by placing a metal box further away from where someone or groups may congregate, or there may be glass windows or an entryway, I don't think that that's very onerous. I think it's proactive, and frankly, I think that's the way we should go.
Okay, one last question.
Our church has a drop box for clothing. A scout had done a Ziegel project to build it, and it was built out of wood. And it has been there for the past 15 years. Nobody's thrown anything in there, lit it on fire or anything like that, and I think it's perfectly safe. And I think that we're doing Goodwill a disservice. They've asked us to not put that in the ordinance, and we're gonna go ahead and say, thank you, but we're really not listening? I'm sorry, that's wrong.
So when anybody asks us not to do something, we automatically don't do it?
This is for someone who's learning a trade on how to build. Why are we gonna say no?
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. There's a second. All in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. All opposed? Motion passes. Without the word wood in there.
That motion includes both the resolution setting the fee and the ordinance.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct,
Yes, ma'am.
as written.
Item number 6.